people there.
Today, we are extremely excited and certainly blessed to be talking with Westbrook native Karin Nelsen. The daughter of Marlo and Donna and the sister to David, Karin lived the 1960s, 70s, and early 1980s in beautiful western Cottonwood County. After developing a strong foundation in southwestern Minnesota and gaining some experience and education in Mankato, Minneapolis, and down south of the border in Iowa, Karin embarked on a fascinating adventure that led her all over the world, leading teams, practicing law, and conducting business in Singapore, Switzerland, and Russia. But then, as she learned about 10 years ago, the gravitational pull for Minnesota is just too strong, and she moved back to Minneapolis. And then, after a few more years with Cargill, Karin returned to her true love, football. Yes, as the executive vice president and chief legal officer of the Minnesota Vikings, Karin really is the envy of each and every one of the 26,000 lawyers licensed in Minnesota. She's the Vikings' top lawyer. Hey, Karin, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to share your interesting story. I know you and the Vikings are busy these days preparing for the 2022 draft, but perhaps you can share a few pearls of wisdom you've gathered on the roads you've traveled, not just here in the upper Midwest, but also across the globe. Did you know that, Karin, 26,000 lawyers in Minnesota?
I did not, and I'm happy to know that piece of trivia now.
You're
I'm
welcome.
going to be at the federal courthouse this afternoon, as a friend of mine is he's being sworn in as the new U.S. attorney for the state of Minnesota. So it's good to have this kind of trivia, because I'm going to be surrounded by lawyers for the afternoon and evening.
Absolutely. I don't know where we ranked on the list, but certainly fewer than California and New York. New York had over 100,000 when I was looking. So that's
Yeah, that does not surprise me.
a lot. That's a lot of bar fees and a lot of dues and a lot of lawyer jokes for sure all around. So you're with the Vikings now. It's a wonderful. You're in your 7th season.
I am.
Can you believe that? It seems like yesterday, maybe, that you started with the team.
It's gone really fast, and I think this part of my career feels like it's gone so much more quickly than other parts. And maybe it's my stage of life too. I think as we get older, I think time it seems to accelerate. But so I am in my 7th season, and that is how we speak in sports, not just in the NFL, but people who work for sports always talk about their seasons, and every sport has a slightly different season. For us, the season really ends whenever the Super Bowl is finished, and then as you turn that clock, you start moving forward to the next season, really as soon as the Super Bowl is done. So that's how we refer to it. But I've really been with the team a little over 6 years.
Well, you've had a few changes this year, and I think, as you said, we talked previously, you had a few changes that first year you came in as well. The Vikings changed stadiums, and you were your first season. You were at the new BOA Bank of America Stadium there.
And actually, it's U.S. Bank.
U.S. Bank.
US,
U.S.
yep,
Bank Stadium.
US Bank Stadium. Right. That was my first season. So that was a very exciting time to join the team. You can imagine, first of all, how much people had worked for years and years to get to that point, because the new stadium is in the same place where the Metrodome was. So the old Metrodome had to come down and then build this new stadium. So that was years in the making, and getting the approvals at the legislature and with the governor so we could actually put this thing together. But those months, it was crazy. I started right at the beginning of March of 2016,
Okay, yeah.
and getting ready for, preseason games in August. I mean, it was a very, very, very exciting and vibrant time. And I will never forget getting into that stadium for the first time. So yeah, that was a big time of change and excitement. And this year has also been, to your earlier reference, a time of change for this organization, as we said goodbye to a couple of leaders who'd been with the organization for a long time. And that's always hard. and these are people who were well respected. But it was time for a change, and our ownership group was ready, and now we have a new general manager and a new head coach in place.
Well, exciting times, especially for a lot of fans out here ready for another big year, and certainly,
Yeah.
if nothing else, we can beat the Packers 2 times.
That's always the most important
Sorry.
goal to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was another little bit of trivia. I was looking at 7th seasons. That means you came in as part of the 2016 draft
Correct.
class, and with Mackenzie Alexander being released this year, you're the you've outlasted everybody from that 2016 draft class. That was the year
Isn't that right?
Laquan Treadwell was the number one pick, and Mackenzie
He
was the
was.
number two
I
pick.
remember that press conference. He's still
You're,
playing. He's still playing, I believe, and Mackenzie is still playing. He was with us last year
that's
again.
right. He came back. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
he
That's right.
did.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, great talent there, but obviously great talent that was picked up here in the executive management and support legal role, but certainly still part of the team and part of that draft, that amazing 26 draft class. Great, great to have
I've never thought of
you still
myself
there.
as part of that draft class, but I like it.
Hey, you were talking about the change with the Vikings. When did they switch to the new practice facility in Egan? Was
Mhm.
that part of that? Was that just after then or just before?
2 years after
2 years
we moved
after, so you were at
here,
Winter
and
Park.
I'm in that office now. That was in, 2018. So
Okay.
I was involved quite a lot with the buildup and the lead up and decisions being made and the building of this our headquarters and our training facility, which is really spectacular. It's a first class facility, outdoor fields, in a great indoor practice facility. It's a wonderful place for us on the business side, and for football it's a great attraction for players, whether they're being drafted or whether they're free agents who are coming to that we're trying to entice to come. It's a real selling point, this facility. It's a great place to work.
Oh, yeah, a wonderful change, although for nostalgia reasons, it's a little sad. I just remember the drive up, coming up 169 from the
Yeah.
southwest, and as you get into Eden Prairie and turn onto the 494 there, you'd always see old Winter I think it was Winter Park, wasn't it? That's what
Winter Park,
yeah,
right.
that was, that's
With the
right
Viking
there.
ship.
The Viking ship
Yeah,
sitting
the
right there.
sail.
I don't know, they didn't keep it there, they should have kept or I wonder, did they move it? Does that ship moved, to Egan, or what
I
happened?
haven't been by there in quite a while. I actually think it's being leased out now. I actually think that might still be there. It's probably not
Yeah.
being maintained, I would guess.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, we can talk a little bit more about your role as a Viking, but I'm also interested in talking about where you grew up, of course,
Mhm.
and those characteristics that were developed into you and kind of helped make you the professional and the woman that you are today. I was looking a bit at your bios on the Vikings website and at your LinkedIn, and I obviously impressive on many fronts, but I didn't see a couple of things that probably are maybe your first and arguably most formidable jobs that you had growing up. Your rock picking. Didn't see that. I didn't see the weed pulling. I talked to your folks a little bit. All the handling of the chickens and
Walking
yeah,
beans
walking
in
the
the
beans
summer.
and processing the sweet corn. Quite
Yes.
the quite the task that was to stay on track and stay disciplined, tedious, and but a lot of work ethic is developed in settings like
It
that. So
is. It
maybe
is. I
talk a
think
bit
that is.
about your memories growing up and how it helped make you who you are today.
Yeah, I think, those specific things you mentioned are obviously very unique to growing up in a farm. Um, and that those are things that need to be done. And farm families do those things. And you didn't really think too much about it. That was just the expectation. But I think, and I know my mom and dad, and you've had a chance to talk to them more than once. You've been on the farm. I think you've probably enjoyed some of my mom's good baking when you were there.
Yep.
But right, I can't. I'm so grateful for the way I was raised and for growing up in that house and in that community for so many reasons. If we're talking about kind of work ethic, that is something that was ingrained in me, and I know a lot of families from that area would say the same thing, right? I always like to say, I feel like I grew up learning how to work hard and to play hard,
Oh,
right? And I think that's important. I think both things are important. And I feel like my parents, they embraced active social life, and they had good friends. They still have good friends. They love to entertain, but, we don't do those things at the Nelsons unless, you get your work done first. And that has stuck with me. I really can't enjoy things. I have to get my work done first, and then I can enjoy the other things that I like to do. Um, but that has been, I think, something that has helped me in my career. I can be counted on, I can be depended on. I'm going to work very, very hard. I'm going to give my best, not just doing the work, but giving my best effort to do smart work. Um, and I think that comes from the way I was raised.
did you get that Nelson drive more from your mother or your father?
That's a good question. I would say, you know, I would say probably a bit more from my dad. I mean, I think my mom and dad balanced themselves out nicely, but dad was more of a driver, and I think a driver in the sense that, he had high expectations, and he expected that my brother and I would do our best. And, and I know I didn't wanna disappoint him, right? I just, um, he didn't stomp his feet a lot or that kind of thing, but the expectation was there, and if you could meet those, I wanted to meet those expectations. I think mom was always so clear about her unconditional love and support, and, she was that tender-hearted, um, loving kind of mom that everyone, I think, hopes to have, and my brother and I were so lucky to have. But I think it was good for me to have both of those things, growing up.
So with that background and heritage, Nelson, some Danish, some Norwegian. I think your mom
Mhm.
said she was a Peterson.
She was a Peterson, right. Well,
And,
she was a Buzzwitz. She
Buzzword.
was a Buzzwitz, but her mother's maiden name was
Okay,
Peterson.
that's what it was. So some
So,
German and
so she's
Norwegian there.
she's German as well. And, Nelson, the way we spell it with an E-N, that's traditionally Danish, right?
Not bad. So you got a little bit of German, a little bit of
Yeah.
Norwegian, and
And, it's funny when I've traveled to those parts of the world, until I speak, most people my name, Karin is Norwegian. It's also, it's not uncommon in Sweden and some in Denmark as well. Um, but to look at me and to see my name, people would assume probably that I could be from there or live in those countries. It's only when I'm unable to speak the language fluently that people the gig is up,
right.
really.
So what would you prefer, a strudel or lefse?
Always lefse.
Always lefse. All right.
Always lefse.
Always lefse. Um,
And lefse not with sugar on it, only butter.
only butter. Interesting.
You can talk to my mom about that. We
I love
prefer
that.
it. My brother and my dad like sugar.
Straight sugar or brown sugar or both?
We just use regular sugar.
We
Yeah.
would sweet and put a little brown sugar in there too. Oh, and lots of butter. Made it healthy. So, you mentioned traveling a bit to that area.
Mhm.
You traveled as a lot growing up to see your uncle, I think, and then you were an exchange student, if I
I
recall
was.
correctly.
I was an exchange student to Norway. So I did that after my sophomore year of so I did a summer program, with YFU. You could do a summer program then. I wasn't really willing to give up a whole school year. In a small town, you've been with that same class from kindergarten, basically, and I didn't have an interest I wanted to stay with my class. And I probably would have lost a year if I would have gone abroad for a year. But I went for the summer, and that was really, I mean, as I recall it, I don't think I came home saying, "This is something that I wanna do." I think my parents suggested it, and I think in particular my dad did. I could be wrong about that detail, but I remember it coming from them, and, and that I thought, and I agreed. I thought it would be, a fun adventure. But I do remember being a little anxious and a little scared about that. There's something about, I was 15 when I left. I turned 16 that summer. This was before the internet. Of course, this would have been the summer of 81, I believe. And you only know that you're gonna go live with this family, and all you know is like a few letters. I mean, you don't it seems crazy now that we would do that, but that was a really important summer for me because really I was exposed to a world outside of Westbrook and Cottonwood County and Minnesota and really our entire country. And it was a time, the Cold War. And I lived with a family that was, very well educated, very in tune with what's happening in the world. And because of where the country is situated, right, obviously cares very much about what is brewing between the US and Russia, right? Because they're kind of physically in the middle, if you will.
Absolutely.
And the father of that family, my Norwegian father, his name was Arvid, and he sadly passed away in the last year or so. But he was a writer, and he was on Norway's equivalent of NPR, right? He would interview people on public radio. He researched everything. Crazy great writer, did lots of books, and traced a lot of history of Norwegian immigrants, to US and other countries. Um, but he was very thoughtful, and so I can still remember, the meals we would have, and he would wanna talk about global issues and ask me how I felt about some of these things, and I had never thought about many of these issues. So, I think that really started opening my mind to think about things in a different way.
Were you able to do a little genealogy work or anything there too? Did you study the history? I mean, I guess it would be the Peterson side.
Yeah, so not at that
Oh,
time, but I did go back, when I lived in Switzerland, and I know we'll talk
okay.
about this in a little bit,
Yeah.
but when I lived in Switzerland and when I lived in Singapore, I did 2 different trips back to, I went to Norway. I also went to places like Finland and Sweden and
Yeah.
Denmark, but I did go back to see, Arvid and the whole family. All 3 daughters live in Norway still. So I was able to reunite with them a couple of different times. But on one of those trips, Arvid had helped to do some work in terms of the actual kind of location of where part of my family on my mom's side would have originated. And so we drove, and I can't remember. It was like a 3-hour drive kind of thing, and we drove, and he got in touch with the person who owned that farm now, where, this family had been, and it was so I got into their house, and then what was so interesting, Dan, is that what they were able to put together was that my ancestors were not living in this main house. They were living in these tiny cabins. These were the workers of the farm.
Oh,
They weren't the landowners of the farm, and this is, I'm sure, part of their drive to leave and to move to the US, ultimately settling in Minnesota where they could have their own land.
absolutely. Isn't that fascinating? Did your mom and other relatives be able to come over and visit? Really?
They did not get to see that,
Okay.
and my mom and dad haven't been to Europe, no, in several years. But that was really, and these are the things that Arvid would do, right?
That is
He'd
so
take
interesting.
all of this time and
So
effort
kind.
to figure these things out.
So you stay in touch with your Norwegian sisters then as
I
well? You
do.
still have a nice
Yep, and
relationship with
and,
them?
my brother is good friends with Carolina, who's the youngest. She spent some time, you probably know, in Westbrook and Wyndham when she was in, her high school years. Um, but it's mainly through social media. Carolina and I will write back and forth, and we'll have more lengthy, and she stayed with me just a few summers ago. She was taking a course. She's in journalism. And so she was doing a course in Minneapolis for several weeks in the summer, and she lived with me. It was probably about 6 years ago.
Oh, nice,
Yeah.
nice. So, David, your younger brother,
Yes. He is
um,
3 years younger.
what was life on the farm like for the two of you?
I wish he could be here right now because I bet he would be laughing like I kind of am, and he'd probably tell a slightly different version of the story.
Uh-huh.
Look, you grow up on a farm, and I had one sibling, and you don't have a neighborhood of people that you just go outside and play, and there's just kids everywhere. So you do. I mean, we would have friends over. It's not like that never happened, but it's different when you're on the farm than when you live in town. And so David and I, whether we liked it or not, sometimes, that's the person that if we were going to play games, or if we were going to play pool or ping pong or whatever, he would be the person I would do it with, right? That's who was there. But I will say that as the older sister, I probably was a bit hard on him at times. And I, uh, we fought, we definitely did fight a lot growing up. Um, but what I'm most happy about, I was always proud of him. I think he was the same, but we definitely, had our moments of disagreement. But he's just one of my closest friends. He really is now, and he has been for a long time. I can't imagine my life without him and his wife and my niece and nephew. And I'm so glad that even if at times we had a bit of a rocky relationship growing up, that we have become the best of friends as adults.
That's awesome. Much like David, I guess, I'm I'm a victim too. I'm the youngest of three boys,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
we were brutal. We youngest. Of course, we remember things in our unique way too. But,
Yes.
we had I like to say I had two extra parents. I like to say I had it easier because my parents were easier on me, and I would always retort, "Well, I had
Yeah,
four,
I always like
four
to
parents."
remind David about that because I think that was the case for him too.
But my big brothers in their parent role were tough at times. They always say it was back to Cold War times too. They just say, "I'm getting you ready for when the Russians invade. You'll then be ready for the torture that they're gonna bring to you." Ah. Um, so is it true that when you would take drives that you didn't want David to sit in the seat with you and you'd push him down and he'd have to sit below so you'd have the whole seat to yourself?
This is absolutely true. It
You were
is
a
embarrassing.
bully. You were a
It
bully.
I was. Right, and I think you've probably heard from my mom and dad, we did do a lot of car trips. I mean, mom and dad have always valued travel and the importance of seeing things, and I think that's really stuck with both David and I. David loves to travel as well, but I would want to lay on the back seat of the car, and this was then, of course, nobody was wearing seat belts at all at any time.
Yeah.
I would lay on the back seat, and then I'd have tell David that he could lay on the floor, with that big hump thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right over. That's very thoughtful for you, and you can have a jacket for a pillow. There you go. You can lay
And
down.
somehow my mom and dad tolerated that. They allowed this to happen. They enabled me.
Absolutely, yeah, they're enablers. Uh, so a lot of trips.
A
Fun
lot of
seeing
trips.
your uncle Gary. I think his
Yeah.
name. He kind of lived
Yep,
all over the
Gary.
place. He was in the service.
Yeah, Gary's always been a inspirational person, to me, to a lot of us in the family. His path, um, was not easy, and I think the way he, found a way to go to college and to follow his dreams of being a pilot, when he didn't have a lot of support for that, and wasn't because my grandma and grandpa were bad people. They just, they expected, I think, him to stay home probably and to be a farmer and to help with the farm. And um, But anyway, he found his way, and he and dad just have such a wonderful relationship, and they're both so proud of each other, and Jan and mom have always gotten along well, and so yeah, we've seen them all over different parts. First, when he was in the Air Force, of course, for
Right.
what, 25 years or longer, retiring as a lieutenant colonel, and then he worked, I think, first for was it Boeing?
Hmm.
And then United, but ultimately with United. And of course, he's been retired now for quite some time.
Well, many thanks for Uncle Gary's service, and what a rich
Yes.
experience it is for the whole family to share,
Yeah,
like you
it
said.
is. Military service is really important in our family. And my dad served, um, and he's doing a special trip and honor flight soon, which maybe you heard about. Um, and Gary and Dad's, his uncle Al, who was also a pilot and really a hero to both Gary and Dad, and I think inspired their service.
That's great. Back to your childhood just for a sec. Traveling obviously very important, but
Yeah,
back in the day, you weren't thinking about practicing law. You were thinking about maybe music, if I recall
I
correctly.
was.
You have
I
a lot
spent
of
a lot
passion
of
and
time.
talent for music.
Yeah, I practiced piano a lot, piano and flute. I played 2 instruments, and I didn't start flute until 5th grade, but I started piano. Mom would know for sure. I feel like I was 6. I think I was 6 when I started piano. I had a great first, piano teacher, Mrs. Birdall. She was exceptional, and I always wanted to practice hard and do well for her, and we had a special relationship. The Birdalls left Westbrook, I think, when I was in 7th or 8th grade, and then I started lessons with an incredible teacher out of Lamberton. Also lived on a farm, Carol Madison, who has taught some of the best pianists and organists in that part of the state. So I just had exceptional teachers, and I loved to practice. I really did. I liked getting better at it. Ultimately, I was able to compete, especially in high school, at different competitions, and it was just something that I took to right away. And I was probably a kid that was afraid of not having lessons as a punishment more than the other way
Oh,
around, like it is for
wow.
some. And I
Well,
took to the flute really easily too. I can still remember I taught myself. I was so excited to start playing the flute. And I taught myself early, probably by 6th grade, how to play the school song. Like, I really wanted to have that part of band too. And then I did a lot of solos and duets, and so I was active with both instruments, and I started college with piano. I had a little scholarship to Augustana my first year of college, when I was still thinking I was going to do something with music, for my professional life. But then I transferred to Mankato, and I was still so active in music. I played for the Ella Street Singers and the concert choir. I played for musicals. I played for theater and all of these soloists. So even though I ended up with an accounting degree from Mankato, I was in that music building, the theater building, all the time. After every class, I was constantly practicing or rehearsing with different groups and people. So music has been such a big part of my life.
one of the many reasons why I joked with you earlier about your twin from
Yeah.
South Central Cottonwood County, Maria.
Yes, I have to
Yeah,
meet her.
we'll have to meet her one day. There's some comparisons there, and there's a lot on many fronts. So your move eventual to Mankato, as you were the Mavericks, a
Yeah.
little bit of
Still purple and gold,
go
still
purple and
purple
gold.
and
That's what I was
gold.
saying. A little foreshadowing there, a little
Mhm.
purple and
Like,
gold.
and Westbrook was purple and gold.
Oh, that's right. That's
We were
right.
the Wildcats before merging with Walnut. That was so when my brother graduated, we were the Westbrook Wildcats, and we were purple and gold.
You can keep some of that wardrobe from yesterday, and then
Well, as
just
you
fit
know, I
right in.
still sport the purple.
Absolutely, absolutely. In continued foreshadowing, the Vikings back in the days that you were in Mankato, they did their training camps.
They did,
in
and I
the,
did go to training camp on occasion, and not just then, but, as an adult, I went down for I mean, I've been a Vikings fan, a pure fan for as long as I can remember. I can't remember not following this team and caring about this team.
yes, started from sitting on your dad's lap, probably watching
Well, I don't know
Chuck
if he would
Noll
have
and
been
Grant
I don't
Carpenter
know if
play.
he would have let me sit on his lap for a Vikings game, but I would have been there. And it's funny, I think back now, and now that I've had the great privilege and opportunity to meet a lot of these legends, become friends with some of these Viking legends like Bud Grant, like Jim Marshall, like Justice Allen Page. Um, I think about watching them play at that age and watching the game through the eyes of my father, you know, because you learn it's like, what does dad get excited about? What does he care about? When does he get mad? And I could see the parts of the game. I learned over time, I think the parts of the game that he really respected, the parts he found frustrating. He seemed to always be frustrated with the offensive line.
Yeah. And the officials, they always call holding when he was
Always
always,
on
yeah.
Ron Yeri, on Ron Yeri.
I was talking to my brothers. Did you know another trivia? Ron Yeary, I didn't realize this. He was the first number one overall number one pick offensive lineman in NFL history back in
I
70,
I
whatever that was.
I did not know
I
that
didn't know
part.
that, but yes, Ron Yeary with holdings.
Yes.
I think I think he had the referees had something against him, but yes, we always joked always being disappointed. The Sundays would be just the rest of the afternoon on Sunday. We'd go to church, come back, eat, watch the Vikings,
Yeah,
and then we'd go out and play football usually for the
yeah.
rest of the afternoon. But it's amazing. A Vikings defeat would kind of just sour the mood for the for the next few
Yeah,
hours,
it
or you
did,
just
and I remember that, especially I remember dad's mood in particular, sometimes he'd leave the house and go outside and do some things, and, sometimes he'd just go lay on the living room floor and take a nap after a Vikings game. They were kind of exhausting,
I
but I
used
still, it's never fun even now and you feel the wins and losses in a different way in this role. Um, but I am not very happy when I'm leaving US Bank Stadium after a loss,
to
and, it takes me a while to kinda pick myself up, and especially if it's a loss to a certain team,
yeah,
or if it's just a game we shouldn't have lost,
should
which,
have.
there were a lot of those kind
Yeah.
of games in the last year.
Like you sometimes rather get beat by 2 touchdowns than get beat by a
Oh,
last second
all
field
these
goal.
2,
I know.
less
We
than
had so many
3-point
last
games.
year, it was so close.
Oh, I know.
Barely defeated. I know how things would turn. But it's just funny, there's a human dynamic there as well, that microcosm of what it does to you, a defeat. But you can even see, like, the businesses around the stadium and just the community
Mhm.
itself. After a win, economic activity goes up. People are spending more for celebratory drinks and things after a
Yeah,
win, and everybody is happy. And if you're losing, not as many people go to the games, and it's kind of
yeah,
dour on the whole community. That's why it's kind of nice to see the Timberwolves playing well, and
it
maybe after the
is.
last couple of years of being tough of downtown living, maybe that can kind of help spearhead some of the return. So, what are some of the lessons you learned, or some of the great memories you had from your Mankato years? You said you studied
Oh,
accounting.
I
Um,
did. I did. So, I think, for me, the time at Mankato is, I mean, I'm not going to say that accounting was a great passion of mine. I mean, I ultimately went to law school. I'm glad though I had that degree, and I'm glad I had experience working as a CPA, and I think that's been helpful to me. But I think I remember mostly my time at Mankato through the lens of music, to be honest. It was such a big part of how I spent all of my time. I was either in rehearsals, I was practicing myself, for the rehearsals, or, um, we were performing. And I my most vivid recollections of Mankato are really in that building and some of those little practice rooms.
Absolutely. Any specific memories or relationships, or even something with the colorful personalities of the Vikings coming to town? Anything that kind of strikes during that time? That would have been what, in the mid '90s? No,
No,
late
no,
'80s,
the mid-80s,
late
mid-80s,
'80s.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
because I graduated from high school in '83. I
I
spent my
forgot about
first year in Sioux Falls, and then I graduated from Mankato in
that.
'87.
Okay.
So, I don't know if there were any, training camp was just so accessible then, of
Right.
course. And so you just, it was just fun. You saw kids waiting in line, and it was a whole different era, right? When, there weren't such restrictions on players. So, they
Right.
were
Right.
freely interacting with fans. And honestly, these players were going out at night too, right? It wasn't the kind of environment now where it's a little bit more, it's a more of a lockdown situation.
It's funny you say that. I follow Tommy Kramer on
I
Twitter,
am.
and he
Mhm.
he tweeted out. I don't remember. It was last couple of days. Sorry, with Keith Millard had just bought a new Corvette, and apparently he was going through a drive-through of a Hardee's or going through, and he hit the intercom or hit something, and there was some sort of incident. And these days it would have been all over, and he probably
Yeah.
back today. He said Scott Studwell, I guess, came in and kind of cleaned everything up, and so everything was okay.
As
Whatever
Scott would
whatever that
do.
meant. Whatever that meant. But
As Scott would do.
he said from that point on,
Scott's one of my favorites. I
really,
mean,
yeah,
he's
he's
just yeah, and not just from his playing days. And if you were in my office now, you'd see that I have 2 framed photos of 2 Vikings in here, and one is Bud Grant, of
mhm.
course, and the other is Scott Studwell. Um, old pictures, and Scott worked for the organization, just retired 2 years ago, so he was a scout for a long time, and so I still see him at Legends events. And he was here for our new coaches press conference, so that was the last time I was able to talk to him.
Sweet Bud Grant. I always would joke with my mom, if there was one person she would have ever left my dad for, it would have been. It would have
Oh
been
yes, sweet
she
and tough,
always had a thing. She stopped. I think she
tough.
stopped watching the Vikings quite as much
Yeah.
when he retired.
We just had a really nice event, this week. So Bud spoke at Twin Cities Dunkers, which Dunkers um, it's an organization. I was just elected into it actually in the last few weeks, but it's an athletic focused organization for the Twin Cities. And so there's some athletes in it, but it's people who work close to athletics, or on the business side, or people that just have supported sports for a long time. It's a very big kind of eclectic group. Um, and I just became a member. And
Awesome.
the annual dinner was Tuesday night, and it was our year to host. So, like every 5 years, the Vikings will host. We hosted it at US Bank Stadium in the Delta Club. And Bud was the featured speaker, and Mark Rosen was the person who interviewed him. And it was nothing short of magical. It was 45 minutes, and Bud, I know Bud and Pat, his companion, very, very well. And so I sat with them at dinner, and he has such clarity. He's turning 95 on May 20th.
Wow.
Such clarity, the stories he remembers and the insight he's giving about the draft and the things he looks for and what his coaching staff was like. And um, it was phenomenal.
Yeah. Some of us,
I nearly wept.
when the decision was made, to make the change at the head coach position here this off season.
Mhm.
Some of us were saying, before, even just in joking, saying it's time to bring Bud Grant back. One more year, let's bring Bud back.
Mhm.
Like,
Boy,
we got better.
he'd do it if
He
he
could do
could.
it. He could do it.
He's always so respectful though of whoever is that in that head
Of
coach role.
course.
He understands how hard that is, and he would never dream of telling a coach what to do, or, if he's asked, he might give some general advice, but he really believes that people need to run their own show like he was able to. So that was
The,
great.
my best Bud Grant story was in retirement, and when the Vikes were at Gopher Stadium, the outdoor, and there was the
Yes.
event, and he came, it was 20 degrees below zero, wind chill, 65 below or whatever it was.
It was the playoff
It was
game
the
that
playoff game, yes.
against the
That's what
Seahawks.
Seahawks. That's what he came out for the coin flip or something in a short sleeve T-shirt. Just like that's Bud Grant, yeah, yeah. I think he could have been elected governor in a landslide right
Yeah,
there.
I think so too.
Oh, that's awesome, and how exciting is that? So yes, you were a CPA. You left Mankato and did that for a few years. Um, an investment, obviously talented. I'm sure you did well, and your clients loved you. But you had a big decision after a few years to change to a different path. What went into that decision?
Yeah, I think there, I think, just personally, it was the right time to make a completely different shift and change in my life. And I just wasn't passionate about what I was doing every day like I wanted to be. And but I wasn't sure yet what else I wanted to do. I had never met a lawyer in person before, Dan, if you can believe that. And so, but what I was thinking as I was going through that thought process, what else would I want to do? What am I good at? What are my skill sets? And then I remembered I did have a couple of professors, both at Augustana and Mankato, who had said, "Have you ever thought about going to law school? I think you would be a really, really good lawyer." And at the time, I was thinking, "No, I don't want to go to school for 3 more years. I've got a plan and a path." And but I was really thinking, and so I didn't know anything about this process. I mean, I knew nothing about what it took to get into law school, what law school was like. So I found out you have to take this exam. It's the LSAT. Of course, everyone knows that, but I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that you could take review courses, that you could do. I literally bought a
Okay.
book. A couple weeks later, I took this exam and I said to myself, if I do well on this crazy thing called an LSAT, it's going to be a sign. It's going to be a sign that this is what I should try next. And I did do well, and so that is honestly how it came to be. And I didn't really look too far at that time. I wasn't as probably confident about going too far outside the Midwest, but I was really deciding between Minnesota and the University of Iowa. And I visited Iowa City and went to the law school and met some special people there. And Iowa also graciously offered me some financial help, which I needed. And so I just took the leap. I didn't know anybody there. And like I said, I still hadn't met a lawyer before I started law school.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like slightly terrifying now to think that I did it. you know? But I did, and I knew pretty much right away it was the right. I could tell the first classes, even though they were so scary,
Yeah.
like this was so intellectually challenging. And there were great people there. Law school is competitive because you're ranked against, like, not everyone can get A's. This isn't like a normal class. If everyone gets 90, everyone gets an A. You're ranked against each other. And so it's competitive, but yet I never felt that so much at Iowa. I felt the professors cared about you, and there were wonderful people there. And I just really was able to thrive there.
Lie detector time. Gophers playing the Hawkeyes. Who did you cheer
What
for?
sport?
Football.
Hawkeyes every time.
Even still. Yeah.
Mhm.
Basketball.
Even
Even
more
more
so now,
so. Yeah.
even more so. So, I serve on the board of directors for the Iowa Law School Foundation,
Right.
um, and I have the privilege of being an officer now for that organization, and I'm passionate about it. Law school changed my life in
Mhm.
every way, and I am passionate about giving back to that law school. And we have two in-person meetings every year. One is homecoming
Homecoming.
weekend, and one is we just had it the beginning of
Good.
April. So I always go to Iowa City for, and everyone just talks about football. Now, if it was basketball, then I would pick the
Gophers.
Gophers.
Okay. Okay. Fair. Fair.
Yeah.
Fair. So, but it's also nice. What a great environment for football down there. The
Oh,
tailgating and Kinnick Stadium and
Kinnick
yeah,
Stadium is magic.
yeah.
It's pure magic.
And now the new tradition of end of the first quarter looking up at the children's hospital. That's pretty
Mhm. I
special.
know.
Special
It's
place.
really
Well, I've
it
kind of
is.
followed you in many ways. Well, in 2 ways. I followed you to Augustana a few years
Yeah.
later,
Oh,
and then I followed you to Iowa for law school a few years later. So,
that's right, that's
yeah,
right.
you're a
I didn't know
favorite
the
with me.
Augustana part.
Yeah, I was there in 90 what, 91, 91 to 95.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The good days. I was even the Augie Doggy mascot for a few games. It was, I
That's
love my
great.
time there. I love Sioux Falls. Um, you were it's interesting how you said earlier on the decision to go to law school that you had a couple of people just kinda encourage you or just
Mhm,
have you consider it because of something they saw. It's just interesting to me as I've gone through life and I've talked to others, is whether it's mentors, formal, or just others giving you solicited or unsolicited advice, just a little bit of encouragement can go a long way and kind of push somebody a certain direction that is so life impactful. And,
mhm.
it's been
Yeah, and you may not and often don't realize it at the
really,
time.
yeah, yeah. I love that. Well, that's great. So you talked a bit about so any of your law professors breathe fire that first year? Or was it you said a little bit of
I'll tell
scary?
you one I'll tell you one quick story. So there was a professor, he's sadly passed several years ago. His name was Professor Vernon, and he taught contracts. He also taught a couple other things, but I had him for contracts, and that was you had small section classes in your first year as well as big sections. So this was in a big section. So I think there were 3 small sections together. Yeah, and I don't know if that's how it was when you were there, but, it was in that bigger auditorium style room. And, did you have Professor Vernon?
No, I didn't have him. I mean, I knew him. He was there,
Yeah, he
but
was
I did
still
not
there.
have him. I did,
He was the one who he always wore red
choreograph.
socks. He wore suspenders
Yeah,
and he wore red socks every
absolutely.
single day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but he was pretty intimidating. He was a little bit like that TV show that had that scary law school professor back in the '70s.
Uh-huh.
You remember that? What was that? I can't
I don't
remember what that was
remember.
called. But, but I this was early on in Contracts 1, and he would when you were called on in that class, you had to stand up, and there were microphones, standing microphones at different parts of the room, and you had to go stand up and speak in a microphone. Not every time, but sometimes. So when he had called, he'd laid out a fact pattern. Is this an enforceable contract or not? And I got called on. I feel like this was in the first month kind of
Mhm.
time of law school. And I was so nervous. I hadn't been called on yet in that class. The class was so big. And I don't remember the fact pattern. I don't even remember if I said, yes, it was enforceable contract or it wasn't. But I stated a position and I must have given a reason. And he said, well, that's interesting. So he said, how many people in this classroom agree with Miss Nelson's conclusion and analysis?
Nobody wanted to raise
Not
their
one
hand.
person raised their hand, not one. And I'm like, I am so embarrassed, like, I'm gonna be a failure here. And, um,
Oh,
and he said, "You are all wrong.
she's right.
She is exactly right." And that moment was a shot in the arm for me that just maybe I could do this.
Developing character and building lawyers at the same time,
Mhm. Yeah.
Professor Vernon. That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. Good years down there for sure. I enjoyed my time. It was a great setting on many fronts. Um, so you left law school. Um, how tough of a decision was it on your next chapter of what type of law you were going to practice, what type of setting, what city, what part of the country, what went into that decision process for you?
Yes, so I was able to clerk, after my first year for a judge here in Minneapolis, and that was through, really family connections that introduced me to this judge and a judge who's passed away now. Um, but then, through a relationship that I had in law school, my law school boyfriend was from Seattle, and, so we had decided we were going to explore that to work after our second year. And so we both, they didn't interview on campus. So we both just did our own, trying to find a job. And we lived with his parents that summer. And so I really liked the firm I was at. I had really didn't know for sure what I wanted to do, but I did feel I needed to take out a lot of loans in law school. And I wanted to get those paid off. I felt a sense of urgency about,
Mhm.
making regular income. And but I really had worked at a great litigation firm, not just litigation, but primarily litigation in Seattle. And so they gave me an offer after my second summer and I took it. And so I knew my whole third year that I was going to be going back to Seattle. And that's what I did. And I lived there for another 3 years. And then I moved back to Minneapolis, and I worked for a law firm as a litigator here too until Cargill, the opportunity at Cargill came up. And that came through an Iowa law alum.
So then a law firm in Minneapolis, the gravitational pull
Mhm.
hit you again. And then the transition to Cargill. What went into that? Law firm life to kind of
Yeah,
type work.
I think I knew I probably wasn't going to stay at a law firm forever. I really wasn't planning on leaving yet, but this interesting opportunity at Cargill came to me through an Iowa law grad who was a couple years ahead of me, and we had mutual friends. And she was at Cargill. She had gone to Cargill after law school, and she had mentioned to our friend, do you think Karin might be interested? We have an opening for a lateral, and Pam got to me and I didn't, I hadn't updated my resume. This was back before, you had all of this stuff at home to do. I think I went to one of these copy places. I don't know. I went somewhere to update my resume and get it in at the last minute. And I went into interview and I really loved it. The people at Cargill are so great. It was a special place, the law department. And the law department had so many women and a lot of women who were senior leaders in that department, and that really stuck out to me at that time. That still just wasn't, common. And so I started there in 98, and I also knew that that was exactly the right fit for me at that time. And I was there for 18 years, and
Wow.
um, I I wouldn't trade that time for the world. And I still feel I'm so loyal to Cargill still. And a lot of, I've had obviously friends who have either retired or have left, but there's still a lot of people there I care about. I'm always interested in what Cargill's doing. And I still find myself sometimes referring to Cargill as we. Like, no, we don't do, no, when we do. And I'm like, wait, wait, wait.
Well, that says
We're
something
not a
about
we.
the Cargill culture. There's
Yeah,
lots of college and MBA programs out there about culture, but they're doing something right. If
yeah,
now after a number of years, you're still saying we about that. That would
yes.
have been a tough decision then. Fast forwarding a bit, but that tough decision leaving Cargill, even though wow, what an opportunity with the Vikings.
It
That,
was,
that was
and
a tough.
it was a decision that was kind of, as I was being approached about a job here at the Vikings through Kevin Warren, who then was the chief operating officer, formerly the general counsel of the team. And now, as you know, he's the Big Ten commissioner.
Right.
He and I got to know each other. We had a mutual friend, and we just developed a friendship and got to know each other. And it was over time, I think, and he was kind of sizing me up, and vice versa. And then we started talking about an employment opportunity, and it was super exciting, and yet, I did have a lot of mixed feelings about leaving Cargill. I really gave Cargill my all, and I felt like Cargill reciprocated. Cargill really invested in me and believed in me, and really Cargill is the most responsible, I think, for believing not that I was just a good lawyer, but that I had leadership potential and helped build me as a leader. And as you well know, those are different skill sets. They require actual experiences. They invested in training at the highest level for me, and then they sent me abroad to have me to put me in leadership roles in places where I didn't know anyone, with different legal systems, with lawyers who didn't speak English as their first language, all of these things because they believed I could do it. And getting that opportunity to actually do it has made an enormous difference in my life.
Yeah, there's many a lawyers that don't make for great leaders. And so it's
It's
also not
it's
only
it's true.
training you, but identifying, taking the time to identify that you had that. Because many I've said sometimes that lawyers
Well,
just
and that comes from, I had the luxury of working with so many clients, and I wish that these were people you could meet and talk to, but Richard Frosch and Dave Larson and Todd Hall, people, Steve Euler, who was the former general counsel of Cargill, who is a dear friend of mine now, and his wife, you know, people who saw that and did something about it, right? Like, they listened to others. They listened when people said, I think there might be something here with Karin. And they did, so they took action and they invested in me. And that's a real commitment.
absolutely. Well, tell us a bit about what's a lawyer for Cargill do? I mean, what are your roles and your responsibilities? I mean,
Yeah, there's lots of different kinds of lawyers at Cargill.
mhm,
So I was what they called a generalist lawyer. So I was assigned to, when I first got there, I was so lucky to be assigned to the animal nutrition business unit, which for those of us who grow up in southwestern Minnesota, we would call it the animal feed business.
mhm,
And that was a global business, and so it allowed me to get exposure to global issues. Even though there were army of lawyers around the world for Cargill that would handle issues in Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, whatever country. I was responsible mainly for North America, but I worked with those lawyers, so it just gave me this taste of a truly global company. But so I handled when I was a generalist lawyer, you handle so many different things for that business. You of course are drafting lots of contracts to support the commercial side of the business. I managed litigation. That business had a lot of litigation. You worked on some employment issues. We did have specific labor and employment lawyers, though, who did that. We had very specific lawyers at Cargill who worked on IP issues, and all of these specialist lawyers were so good. I mean, Cargill to this day really hires great, great lawyers who are good business partners, right?
mhm.
People who understand, have the capacity to understand the business. Um, so that's what I did. And, you just kind of move along and you start working on more sophisticated projects. I started doing more M&A work, mergers and acquisition work for that business. And developed an antitrust expertise. And that I use that on a broader basis throughout Cargill. And then had the opportunity to start managing other lawyers. And, I think, once you start doing that, so I started spending a bit more of my time on people management and law department leadership. And that's kind of when they approached me about saying, we think this might be a good time for you to be an expat and to work outside the U.S. And we have a real need. Cargill, expat assignments are expensive for a company, and the company needs to have a need for you there, but you also want to have the right person go who will take advantage of because it's such an incredible development opportunity. So that's what came to me.
Well, your travel growing up certainly helped you on
Yeah,
that front. So
yeah,
able
it
to use
did.
a little bit of that. So your first, I guess, stint in military parlance, deployment overseas, was to Moscow.
It was.
So from 9 years in Minneapolis to 9 months in Moscow.
Right.
What was uh, what was that like? A little different setting
It
there.
was. That was a big change. It was, I think it really it forced me right away you know, to learn to be adaptable. I think that's part of what these assignments do, Dan, is that you know, you have to learn to pivot and adapt and to not have things be perfect um, and figure things out on the fly. And that's what you do in a place like that. But and it greatly saddens me what's going on in that part of the world right now with Russia and the Ukraine. I'm so heartbroken. I was responsible for the lawyers in Ukraine when I was in Russia, as well as lawyers in Romania and Hungary and Switzerland. Um, and they're all wonderful people. And I know there's so many Russian people that are not supportive of what's happening now, and um, it just breaks my heart all the way around.
Are you currently in touch with some of them? I mean, have you?
I'm not. Most of the lawyers I worked with in Russia and Ukraine are no longer with Cargill. One lawyer is, and I've just been a bit hesitant
Absolutely.
because I don't
Yeah.
want to put
Put
him
them in
in
a tough
a
spot. Yeah.
bad
Yeah,
spot.
absolutely. Smart. Um, yeah, it's challenging and tragic and saddening on so many fronts.
But I think
But
it also in a country like Russia, I think people in this country have such preconceived notions
Mhm,
about Russian people and what it's like there. And so that forces you to challenge your own stereotypes. And
mhm.
the Russian people, and especially in Cargill's office, I was one of two native English speakers in that office. And these people were nothing short of wonderful with me and to work with me and for me. And um, caring, warm, helped me with so many things, different challenging things. And I won't ever forget that.
That's great. It's the same thing where you get through all those stereotypes, you get through the on the surface issues. My time, you know, collectively, probably 24 months of my life in the Middle East, um, just loved and cherished so many of the relationships I had with Iraqis and
Yeah,
other.
I'm sure.
I just
And
love.
I think this is one of the lessons, Dan, and you know this in a different way, but what you're saying so resonates with me because what you learn working with people from different countries, different skin colors, different um, ethnic origins. People are people, and these Russian people who welcomed me they cared about their families like I cared. They cared about their careers like I did. They cared about their safety like I do. I mean, these are human beings, and we have the same needs and the same um, core desires, I think, really. And it's so important to remember that about people. And that has stuck with me. I knew that, but I really experienced it there. And that has stuck with me
Yeah. Of all the
till now.
lessons you learned in the advancement and maturity you gained, some of those types of
Yeah.
issues, the non-business experiences are what
Hmm.
last with you the longest. And it's back to
Hmm.
relationships, because you've
Always.
maintained relationships with all these different places you've been, I'm sure, not just Moscow, it's Singapore and Switzerland and
Yeah.
you're in Seattle.
Well, and the friend I'm meeting next week in London, she's lives in Singapore, and she's just in London for an extended vacation, and I'm meeting her there. But I mean, we're literally on opposite sides of the world now, and she is still one of my dearest friends. And we're committing to this week together in London.
Oh, how much fun is that?
Yeah.
Oh, good, 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 good. Next time you gotta go, gotta take that break out of Minnesota in January. Um, yeah, maybe not go to London in January though.
Yeah, probably not.
But great. So then the transition, your latest and greatest move um, to the Minnesota Vikings organization. How must that have been pretty exciting for your family? Um, Mom and dad, pretty pretty pumped. What did that first conversation go with your dad?
Yeah, I don't
Well,
know if I remember that I mean, it was such an exciting time, and you're kind of like telling everybody before it becomes public because
yeah,
there was a more public announcement about it. Um, but I just remember both of them being so happy, and not because
yeah.
I was leaving Cargill, because they
Oh,
both really loved my time at Cargill too, and they respect that company. But they knew that this was a special, unique opportunity, and so they were just so proud. I just remember feeling how proud they were, and that meant so much to me from both of them.
absolutely. I was just joking with somebody the other day when I was talking about you in this. Other than the attorney general, who what more fun job could you potentially have? And maybe the work, there's other jobs where the work would be more exciting or this, that, and the other. But it's just kind of the lawyer for the Vikings, in a place like that where the Vikings are just so important,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
such
it's
great
something that
history.
I don't take it lightly. I
Yeah,
will tell you that for sure. I don't. I know I'm enormously fortunate to have this opportunity. I also feel like I feel a sense of responsibility, not just to this organization, but because the Vikings have such a important platform.
hmm
I have such this true sense of responsibility to help this organization use this platform for good. So, my role here, even though I'm extremely honored to be the chief legal officer, I have the honor of working on overseeing our social impact department and um, how we make a difference in the community. And we really do through the efforts of our players and our coaches and our staff and leveraging this brand of the Minnesota Vikings to do good um, is something I wake up every day thinking about. And it makes me, I can't tell you how happy it makes me when we're able to do that. And some things people hear about, a lot of things they don't. The important thing is that we're doing it and we're even doing more of it now.
right, right. Special deal. What are some of the most challenging things that you do?
Well, I think, the last 2 years have been, hard for lots of reasons for everybody, in different respects. I think being one of the core leaders here to get us through COVID, to manage the COVID
Mhm,
protocols
mhm.
of the NFL, of the state of Minnesota, all of the compliance with the league, the reporting that I needed to do regularly with the league on exactly what we're doing, how we're complying every single day in every single area. And then, help to shepherd our own organization through that, which was, I know, very frustrating to them at times. And yet we had to do it the right way. And so I was very committed to that. But it's been a huge lift, an exhausting lift the last 2 years in that. And so I think that's probably been the hardest. It's also been like most things, and this, the hardest things are almost always going to be the greatest areas of opportunity for growth and development. So it was good, I think, for me to have that kind of discomfort and that sense of, this is important, this is all urgent, this matters, am I up for this? And then you're like, yes, I have to be, and I have to do this, and I have to do this well. And um, so I think that was another opportunity in a very different setting in a way I couldn't have anticipated to strengthen my leadership skills.
Mhm.
It wasn't so much lawyering, it was leadership and compliance and honestly a lot of writing, a
Oh,
lot of like
absolutely.
my writing skills.
Yeah.
So anyway, that I think has been probably the most challenging part of the my tenure with the Vikings.
Well, a a smart, arguably very easy decision for you to leave Cargill and go to the Vikings, but also a smart, uh, arg and definitely an easy decision for the Vikings to hire and retain
Yeah.
somebody like you. So that's wonderful. What a great fit it's been. And that's as much as anything else. You want talent and you want skill, but you want to make sure somebody is a good fit for an organization and where
Yeah.
their personality fits and can even help drive the culture of an organization. And obviously,
Yeah, and I'll
you're
tell
doing
you that
something right
last piece
there.
is something that I also take very seriously, is being a driver of the culture that we want and expect here.
Well, that good Danish, Norwegian, German background, the last name of Nelson with an E, certainly
Nelson
helps.
with an E.
Nelson with an E. Um, to kind of help close out here, you talk a little bit about lessons learned from your life. We talked earlier about pearls of wisdom, some advice you'd give to others who are in different points of their life that just listening in, and then maybe some themes that would maybe kind of help, that you think of with your life and things that were important to you. growing up. Talked a little bit about relationships and philanthropy,
Mhm.
and the Minnesota roots. Some things like that, just things that strike out for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to quickly narrow down to a
Yeah,
couple. There's so many,
yeah,
right? I
yeah.
feel like you go through so much. You've lived a good, long, healthy life. There's lots of pearls. Um, I would say that um, making the decision to invest in relationships in all parts of your life, your family, your your village of people who were with you back in the day, the people you have the great honor of meeting along the way. To invest in relationships and investing in people is probably the if I had to narrow down, besides being someone who's not afraid of hard work, I think the commitment to relationships and true genuine relationships, not touching base, not networking, taking the time to get to know people, to understand what matters to them, to help them whenever you can. And it will no doubt come back to you in some other way. That's not why you do it. But that has been a big, I think, part of not only my success, but my day to day quality of life and meaning, right? So, relationship building and that commitment has made a huge difference in all aspects of my life. And I would encourage it's in an era of texting and all kinds of things that don't seem so personal anymore. Nothing takes the place of a true, genuine relationship in your personal or professional life. So I think that would be the first thing. The other thing I would say, if I just think about more work focused, I think being open minded and willingness to try new things has been incredibly important to my career path and trajectory. So, when they first, for just one example, initially I was supposed to be going to Geneva, Switzerland first only. And then when Steve Euler, then the general counsel, said, you know what, some stuff has changed in Russia. I need you to go to Russia first. Will you do it? And I froze and I said, I don't think my first answer was no. And when he said, I want you to go there next week. I want you to meet the people you'll be working with there. I want you to see the city. I think you're going to like Moscow, by the way. But I need you to keep an open mind and just go make this trip. Talk to your mentors, which I did within the organization. Do that, then come back. We're going to talk in 2 weeks. That counseling from him shifted those experiences changed my life. They changed the way I look at the world. They changed the fact that I'm the leader that I am today. If I would have said no to that, I just don't even think I'd be sitting here talking to you now. I just don't. And so I think now not everyone needs to move to Russia, but I'm saying I think we think we know our path. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. But if we stay open to things that we may never have thought of, it's a wonderfully life-changing experience and you're no doubt richer for it.
So well said. It's not just, and it's in addition to being open, it's being resilient to something else too.
Yeah,
Sometimes the door closes, or when an opportunity you thought you wanted is no longer there for whatever reason, and then
right.
something else opens up. And to not, some people get down and get bummed. No, the next thing, you're going to look back 10 years from now and be so glad that you didn't get what you thought you wanted, and maybe you had
Yes.
something else that happened too. But
Yeah.
I so well said on both fronts there. Thank you for sharing, and and congratulations on
Oh,
all the success you've had, and congratulations to the Vikings for getting you, catching you, and to your parents for getting you back in relatively close
yeah.
proximity. We were talking about gratitude. I'm in Virginia now. My folks are up there. I get back there some, but that's one of the most difficult parts of a military life is you just
Yeah.
being pulled away. Some people, yes, I got to get away from home and I love it. That wasn't me. I had rich
Mhm.
relationships with family and friends at the undergrad, the high school, and law school levels, certainly my family, extended family. And when you choose to up and leave, it's tough.
Yeah.
Um, but you know that's it's a wonderful place up there, and I'm actually jumping on a plane here in a couple weeks to come say hi to mom and dad.
Oh, good.
So
I'm glad, and I
I'm
hope
looking
our
forward to that.
paths will cross
Oh,
where we can actually be in the same place and the same time, and I really look forward to meeting you and your family in
absolutely.
person.
We'll get some of that Donna Nelson bacon
Maybe you can get
sometime
here
now.
for a Vikings game.
Hey, hey, hey! We'll find. Would love that
Okay.
more so than my son. I'll tell you though, I failed a little bit as a parent. My son is a Packers fan. He's
I could take any other team except that one.
and but you know what? The reason he is, when you do the psychoanalysis of it, is the same reason why he is an Alabama Crimson Tide fan.
I get it.
And it's not just their winner, they win. It's not that dynamic. It's his mom is from the New Orleans area and is an LSU fan, and their number
Mhm,
one rival was LSU, and
mhm.
dad is a Vikings fan, number one rival. So he had the personality of doing the
Ah,
opposite of his
of
parents.
doing the
And
opposite.
so that's kind of
Okay.
why he did. But
Yeah.
anyway,
No,
um,
I jest about they are our biggest rival, but I have a ton of respect for the
yeah,
Packer organization and the
absolutely.
people there. I really do.
And that they still play outside. Although it's a wonderful stadium, I kind of like that they still
Lambeau's pretty
a lot
special.
of history there. Anyway, well, thank you. Have a fabulous day and rest of your week in spring.
Thank
And let's
you.
have a great draft, Vikings. And
Let's do it.
let's see you in the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
From your lips to God's ears.
Deal.
Bye
All right.
now.
Thank you, Karin. Dan Keeker here. Thank you for listening to this episode of the All Roads Podcast, my fun, thought-provoking conversation with Karin Nelsen. I'm always looking for more interesting, talented people to share their journeys. If you have any suggestions, please email me, Dan Keeker, at allroadspodcast@gmail.com. allroadspodcast@gmail.com. Until then, go out and make the most of this and every day. Go travel your road with a purpose